Hi guys, so this is going to be a response video to Carol Adams, who did a debate at the University of Oxfordshire. It was horrendous, I'm not going to lie, and some of the things that she came up with on a debate surrounding veganism was, I think, very misguided and quite wrong in a lot of ways. So yes, I'm going to go through some of her points and respond to them.
I've read the motion, and I believe we should move beyond all meat. So, what we choose to eat has consequences far beyond the circumference of our plates. Specifically, your vote tonight expresses your allegiance to or rejection of a white supremacist patriarchal worldview. Do we vote to further inequality and sustain world-destroying violence? In the sexual politics of meat, I introduced the concept of animals as absent reference. In order to be eaten, animals must disappear as living beings, that is, be killed.
Okay, so in terms of this point, I think that mixing in veganism with other issues like feminism and anti-racism is kind of misguided and in some ways kind of inconsistent in a lot of ways. So for example, mixing in feminism with veganism is wrong on a lot of levels. So for example, feminists often promote contraception as being a kind of way of liberating women, for example, and they'll support policies like for example, in America, employers paying for employees contraception. They'll support policies like having governments giving out free contraception to everyone, for example. And I think that this is wrong and misguided in terms of veganism. Now, a lot of contraceptions, like for example, the contraceptive pill, the IUD, and a number of other hormonal type contraceptions are actually tested on animals and contain animal ingredients. And so you're saying that taxpayers like myself should pay for contraception which has animal ingredients and is tested on animals for other people to use, and I don't think as a taxpayer I should be paying for that. I think that that's completely wrong, and that goes for me against veganism, because I don't want people consuming more animal products freely. In terms of this kind of anti-racism thing, often the people who are anti-racist, and I don't know if this is the case with Carol, but they're also globalists. And I find that globalism and veganism, again, in my mind, don't particularly go hand in hand. Now, if we need as societies, as particularly as Western societies, to be very, very careful about the types of people that we're allowing into our society, about the mass immigration of people from certain cultures into UK society. Now, one of the reasons for this is the fact that some cultures treat animals incredibly badly, and they have very different views on animals to the way that we view animals in the UK. Now, for example, in my time in China, I saw a lot of animal cruelty just within the 2 months that I was there, and these are things that I experienced firsthand, and I saw people doing around the place, and they were perfectly legal, and no one was really battering an eyelid about these things. So probably the most horrific thing that I saw was a guy who had a fish tank on the back of his motorcycle, and he was driving around with his fish tank on the back of his motorcycle, and then when someone wanted a fish to eat, he would grab a fish out of the fish tank and basically cut its head off. I saw animals like little tiny turtles being kept in watches as kids' toys. And obviously these things are very, very inappropriate environments for these animals, and they don't have, until very recently, China didn't have any animal welfare laws at all. And the way that animals are viewed in China is they're viewed very much as property and as things. They're not viewed as sentient beings that in any way need protecting. And so if we just had a mass immigration of Chinese people to the UK, what would end up happening is we would end up having less good animal welfare laws, and we'd end up having less vegans around the place, because there's less of a cultural view of animals as beings in their own right, and it is sentient individuals in their own right. And so I don't really like this kind of anti-racism thing being mixed in with veganism, because I think it's in some ways misguided, particularly if you are supporting globalism with your anti-racism.
The food heritage of pre-conquest peoples, like the land itself, was overrun. It was the colonizers, especially the British, who declared that the virility of meat-eating nations explained their success over the supposed feminine and weak rice-eating countries they defeated. Historically, the vast majority of the world lived without animal protein as a central part of their diet. The assumption that the best protein comes from corpses is a racist belief, as it erases and replaces indigenous African, Asian, Mesoamerican cultural food practices. Meat eating is also one of the ways gender-based structures of oppression are perpetuated.
So there are 2 main points that have in relation to her point about white countries influencing countries in the non-West to eat more animal products. The first point I want to make out is the fact that it's not really white people's fault that these countries are eating more animal products now than they ever were in the past. And the second point I want to make out is the fact that she's talking about, Indian cultures and, certain parts of India where they're lacto-vegetarian. And I do want to highlight some of the cruelty that happens to animals in these cultures. Because veganism is very much a Western thing. It was only invented in around about 100 years ago now. It's wrong to kind of imply that more vegetarian cultures are actually nicer to animals. And I think it's forgetting about the cruelty that animals in vegetarian cultures actually experience. So in relation to her first point, which kind of blames white people or Western cultures for influencing non-Western cultures to eat more meat, I don't think that that's really the case. Essentially, as society grows and as we gain more advanced farming practices, people tend to eat more and more meat. And as people become richer, as the economy grows in a particular country, again, people eat more and more meat. And you can see this happening with China. Their economy is going up and up and up. And again, people are eating more and more and more and more meat. And this is because, originally meat was a very expensive product, but as they're getting more money, they're able to eat more of what they want to eat, and they're able to eat more meat. If we look, and the thing is, she talks about kind of indigenous cultures, and that, certain parts of the world, their diet was primarily vegetable based. Okay, well, that's fine, but so was the diet of people living in the UK about 1,000 years ago. In the Viking era, we ate a lot of vegetables and very, very little meat because it just wasn't as available as it is now. People didn't really have as much access to meat as they do now. It took a long time and a lot of money to, raise up a pig till it was a certain size. And so we were mainly vegetarian at the time, if not pescatarian. And so, as farming practices get better, and as your economy gets better in your country, you eat more meat. And that's shown time and time again with, statistical graphs showing how the economy is increasing and how meat consumption is increasing, both in the West and in places like China. So it's kind of a myth that somehow, Western cultures are influencing indigenous cultures to eat more meat. It's very strange to me that would be an argument. So the second point I wanted to make is there are vegetarian cultures in other societies. So for example, Hindus in India, they're lacto-vegetarian. However, they do awful things to animals. They tie male calves up to trees, and also female dairy cows whose production have declined, and they basically die in the hot sun. They starve to death in the hot sun. And this is considered okay in their culture simply because they're not directly killing the animal themselves. And so, saying there are vegetarian cultures, you seem to have a kind of an unrealistic view of how these cultures work, or an unrealistic view of the cruelty that these animals go through in these cultures. And it seems very sad to me. Really what we should be doing is trying to encourage those cultures to go vegan, rather than having this, this unrealistic view of what their culture is like.
Feeling and wants order. And yet the reasons we hear are so irrational. If I did not eat animals, they never would be born. Meat eaters, like anti-abortionists, have forgotten that one quality of non-existence is not having awareness about existence. Meat eaters say, why, if we put prisoners to work...
So there's a big difference between an animal that was never born and a fetus. In terms of a fetus, there is evidence to suggest that fetuses are in some way conscious, as little as between 17 and 16 weeks. Basically, around 17 to 16 weeks, a fetus can do reflex actions like a reptile can. And it has as much conscious as a reptile, because the neurons that are in its body are basically attached to the part of the brain that reptiles have. So they can do these kind of reflex actions. They have the same level of consciousness as a reptile. However, they can't do the kind of higher level of reasoning that people can. So it would kind of seem very odd to me if she's saying that that fetuses at 16 weeks should be killed, but not reptiles. It's a very weird argument, and it doesn't really, I think, hold up to scrutiny very well. Anyway, thank you for listening, guys, and if you have any comments or questions, leave them in the comments down below. Feel free to subscribe and like this video. Bye, guys. Oh yeah, P.S. I am actually doing a meetup at the Vegan Campout. If you are interested in that, feel free to email me. I'll leave my email address in the comments down below. Okay, thanks, guys. Bye.